Have you ever spent your whole life building something, only to be told one day that none of it matters anymore? That question echoed through my mind as I sat across from Sierra Long in the high-rise glass office of Neuronix Logistics. It was a Tuesday. Outside, the city pulsed with artificial intelligence and buzzword ambition. Inside, Sierra's voice was steady and rehearsed. "Leo, you're not compatible with the future we're building here." I had to pause, not because I was surprised, but because I realized I wasn't angry. I was disappointed, not just for myself, but for what they were about to lose. 28 years. I had architected the very system that kept this company alive, long before they ever hired AI specialists or talked about digital twins. But now, I was a legacy. A fossil. Across the room, a young intern with perfectly styled hair unplugged my ID card and placed it in an envelope. No ceremony, no handshake. Just thanks for your service and a slide deck on transformation strategy. Before I go on, I'd like to ask you something. Have you ever been quietly erased by something you created? If this story hits a nerve already, stay with me. And if you value real experience over hype, comment below and subscribe. You'll want to hear how this ends. I wasn't always a liability. Back in 1995, Neuronix was just a startup with 5 employees, a second-hand coffee machine, and a warehouse in the industrial district of Phoenix. No air conditioning, no real funding, just vision and exhaustion. I had just been laid off from a telecom job that downsized its entire IT division, and when I walked into that dusty office with a printed resume and a tie slightly too wide for tech culture, I didn't expect much. But the founder, Alan Briggs, shook my hand like he meant it. "Can you wire our routing operation so we don't lose another shipment to Wisconsin?" I smiled. "Give me 2 weeks and some whiteboards." That's how it started. Over the next 28 years, I became the architect of Neuronix's nervous system. While others pitched ideas, I built solutions, code that worked at 3 a.m., systems that didn't crash during Q4, and integrations that no one else dared to touch. When storms knocked out our Arizona hub in 2003, it was my off-site mirror that saved $2 million in data losses. When we merged with Rotacargo in 2010, I wrote the bridge code between their outdated servers and our modern framework. No one asked me to do it. I just knew it had to be done. There were no awards, no applause, just emails at odd hours and the quiet satisfaction of things not breaking. My wife, Clara, used to joke that I talked more to servers than to people. She wasn't wrong. We had a small home not far from the warehouse, and on weekends while she gardened, I'd sit with my laptop on the back porch, troubleshooting a latency issue or fine-tuning a custom API. She called it your quiet war with the machines. But Clara understood. She saw that the systems I built weren't just code. They were people's paychecks, customer trust, and real-world deliveries that couldn't be late. Clara passed away 5 years ago. Ovarian cancer. It was fast, brutal, and unforgiving. After she was gone, I poured everything into work. Not because I was chasing promotions or praise, but because I needed something predictable. Something that still responded to logic when the rest of my life didn't. Our 2 sons had moved out years before. Tom into architecture in Denver and Matt into civil service overseas. I didn't blame them for being distant. I had always been the father who answered emergency calls from the server room instead of joining dinner. So Neuronix became my life. And in a way, I became invisible inside it. The newer executives never questioned how their logistics platform scaled so reliably. They didn't need to. It just worked. Because I had spent nights rewriting scripts during blackouts and holidays isolating rare bugs that could have cost the company clients. The code wasn't glamorous. It wasn't built for demos. But it handled over 80,000 shipment instructions daily, with less than 0.01% failure. I once shaved 12% off company-wide fuel costs by implementing a real-time routing algorithm that took me 6 months of research and 3 all-nighters. No one asked how it worked. They just patted the marketing team for improved efficiency. So, when Sierra Long came in, hired from a shiny tech accelerator and armed with phrases like agile disruption and AI convergence, I knew she wouldn't see me. People like her don't notice the foundation. They only see the glass on top. But what they never understand, until it's too late, is this. If you chip away at the core without knowing what holds it together, the whole thing will crack, and Sierra was about to find out, one deleted line at a time. After Clara passed and the company sold its controlling interest to a venture-backed tech group in San Francisco, things started to change, and not in subtle ways. At first, it was just language. Meetings were no longer called status updates, but sprint reviews. We didn't fix bugs. We resolved experience disruptions. People who barely understood the shipping grid began referring to it as a mobility data ecosystem. Then came the people. Sierra Long arrived 6 months before my exit. She was 34, maybe younger, with a sleek blazer, a smartwatch that buzzed every 5 seconds, and a way of speaking that always felt like she was quoting someone smarter. She was the new vice president of product transformation, a title that said everything and nothing. Her resume included stints at companies that had burned fast and bright, then disappeared quietly in industry blogs. But Sierra had one thing the board loved: buzz. She knew how to speak future. And in meetings, that's all she did. She brought in consultants, fresh-faced grads in hoodies, who walked around the office conducting experience audits. They never once entered the server room in the basement, didn't ask about data, architecture, or legacy routing. Instead, they installed whiteboards and motivational posters about flow state. My own name began to vanish. One week, I wasn't invited to the Friday engineering sync. The next, my credentials were downgraded for security. I wasn't offended, I had seen it before, how new blood likes to scrub away the fingerprints of what came before. But what struck me was the speed. I tried to speak up. Once. During a planning session, Sierra was outlining the new AI-based shipment prediction model that would eliminate human dependency. I raised a quiet hand and said, "Have you considered how this will integrate with the legacy infrastructure on the partner side? Many of our regional clients still rely on FTP-based updates, not JSON endpoints." There was a pause. One of the consultants glanced at me like I'd spoken Latin. Sierra nodded slowly, then continued without answering. 2 days later, my calendar access was revoked. And that's when I knew I wasn't just being sidelined. I was being erased. It was the little things. A new hot desk policy meant I no longer had a fixed seat. My team was reassigned to report directly to a 29-year-old with no systems background. The company newsletter listed Sierra's department as leading innovation, while operations, my domain, was lumped under maintenance and support. Meetings became standing only. Not a metaphor. Literally, no chairs. "Keeps energy up," Sierra said. I didn't bother attending. The final insult came a week before I was let go. I had spent a weekend writing a 17-page memo detailing potential conflicts between the AI engine and our partner sync modules. I sent it to the engineering leads. No one replied. I later found out it had been flagged by the internal system as non-priority content. I stopped trying. Let them build their tower. Let them forget who laid the bricks. I knew what was coming, and I knew exactly how much it would cost them. The official separation meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 9 a.m. sharp. Sierra called it a transition. Alignment session. I walked in with a pen, a notepad, and a quiet decision already made. She didn't even look up at first. Just flipped through a few digital slides on her tablet while her assistant handed me a generic offboarding packet. Benefits. Sunset dates, legal disclaimers, and a hollow paragraph about valuing past contributions. "We'll need you to document everything related to legacy systems before the end of the week," she said, tapping her stylus against the screen. "Cloud Nova's integration team is ready to begin migration Monday." I nodded. "Of course. I'll make sure everything that's officially part of Neuronix is properly documented." She smiled, not catching the distinction. Officially. Over the next 2 days, I wrote one of the cleanest transition packets they'd ever seen. 63 pages, indexed and searchable, covering every schema, permission group, and system uptime, protocol that had been logged and formally reviewed over the years. Everything on record. What I did not include were the emergency scripts stored in deep subdirectories, files named things like opt, root patch, nav11, final3.sh, or auth, bridge, and temp.pa that had quietly evolved into permanent backbones of our infrastructure. I didn't document the real-time caching layer I had added during the 2015 peak season crisis, or the vendor-specific authentication bridges I built on Christmas Eve 3 years ago, when a critical partner's API suddenly changed without notice. Those scripts weren't officially part of any SOP. They weren't on the books. And they weren't part of my responsibility anymore. On Friday afternoon, I packed my things, just a single cardboard box, a framed photo of Clara from a company holiday party, a pair of noise-canceling headphones, a backup drive I had used to test failovers. No one said goodbye. I walked out past the ping-pong table and the kombucha tap without a word. That evening, I called Javier Peña, a longtime colleague who had moved to FleetCor Freight, a mid-sized, regional competitor with a focus on reliability over flash. "You still looking for system support?" I asked. Javier laughed. "Leo, if you're free, I'll clear the desk myself." By Monday morning, I had a 3-month consulting agreement with FleetCor, not glamorous but stable. Their CTO personally welcomed me in a call, no buzzwords, just real problems and a desire to solve them. Back at Neuronix, Sierra announced the full migration to Cloud Nova AI infrastructure, with press releases and LinkedIn banners. She talked about ushering in a new era of autonomy and scalability. I watched the live stream from my home office, sipping coffee and smiling at the irony. They had no idea that autonomy in this case meant flying blind, and that scalability? It was balanced on lines of code they didn't even know existed. The most dangerous part of replacing experience with optimism isn't just what you lose. It's what you never knew you had in the first place. They thought I'd left quietly. But I hadn't left at all. I was just waiting. It didn't take long. By early Tuesday morning, just 36 hours after Neuronix flipped the switch on their fully autonomous AI infrastructure, the warning signs were already blinking red. At first, they thought it was just a temporary hiccup, a misconfigured deployment, maybe a caching issue. But by 10:22 a.m., the calls began. Henderson Express, one of Neuronix's oldest freight partners, reported that none of their shipment confirmations had come through. Their API logs showed repeated timeout errors. The AI system had failed to authenticate their credentials, something I had spent 2 months coding around years ago, because Henderson's platform used a proprietary 2-factor handshake incompatible with standard cloud logic. An hour later, Iron Path Distribution called in a panic. Their entire outbound delivery queue was frozen. Orders scheduled to ship by noon were stuck in a pending loop. The system couldn't push routes, couldn't validate packages, couldn't even generate proper manifests. Internally, the new team started scrambling. Sierra's inbox was reportedly flooded with subject lines like urgent, blocking issue, and critical outage. The Cloud Nova consultants were pulled into emergency huddles, but their platform, sleek as it was, had no awareness of the deeply customized authentication bridges I'd built. They assumed standard JSON-based API calls would suffice for every client. They were wrong, and worse, they didn't even know where to look for the fix. I heard about the chaos secondhand from Jordan, a junior developer who had once shadowed me during a Thanksgiving night patch deployment. He called me that afternoon from the Neuronix parking lot. "Leo, it's bad. The system's rejecting nearly half of all inbound freight data. No one knows why." I could almost hear the stress in his voice. I asked him what the log said. Mostly protocol mismatch errors. The consultants are trying to brute force schema overrides, but it's just generating more exceptions. I leaned back in my chair. Have they asked about the bridge scripts? The legacy connectors? There was a pause. They didn't know they existed. Of course they didn't. The partners that mattered, the old ones, the complex ones, hadn't changed their systems in years. Because they didn't need to. They had stable integrations, custom ones I had built quietly off the record. during moments no one else was willing to work, but those modules were never added to the official infrastructure diagrams, never pushed to the main repository. They existed only in my head, and in the backup notes I didn't leave behind. By the end of the day, Neuronix's routing backlog had grown by over 18%. Drivers were stuck at docks waiting for dispatch instructions. Clients were calling with missed SLA alerts. A federal contract with the Postal Logistics Group triggered an audit due to undelivered freight. That evening, Sierra held an emergency company-wide call. I wasn't on it, of course, but a screen recording eventually found its way to me. "We're experiencing some temporary alignment issues during the migration window," she said, eyes slightly bloodshot. "We're working closely with our AI partners to address unexpected compatibility challenges." Unexpected. That was the word she used. As if this were a weather event, as if the ground hadn't been shifting the entire time and someone, me, hadn't tried to warn them. The cracks were visible now. Hairline, fractures that would soon become structural failures. The kind of fractures no machine learning model could patch. And this was just the beginning. The first call came Wednesday morning at 6:17 a.m. It was Jordan again, his voice low and ragged. "They can't stop the failures, Leo. It's spreading to the inventory sink now. Sierra wants to know if you'd consider helping." I stirred my coffee slowly. Outside, the Arizona sky was just starting to brighten, a pale streak of amber over the mountains. I didn't answer right away. "I'm consulting now," I finally said, measured. "Fleet Corps' onboarding is keeping me busy." Jordan hesitated. "I know, I told her that. But she said she's authorized to offer compensation." I could almost hear her words echoing through him. Tight, corporate, desperate. 2 hours later, an email arrived from Neuronix HR with a subject line that might have once been comical. "Emergency consultancy proposal. Immediate response requested." "They were offering $75 per hour. I replied once. "My rate is $250 per hour. Minimum 60-hour block. Remote only. Payment in advance." I knew it would rattle them. It was a standard rate in crisis infrastructure consulting, but they still saw me as the old guy in the basement, not the only person left who understood how their foundation was built. I didn't hear back that day, but I didn't need to. By Thursday morning, the system was hemorrhaging. Shipment routing errors were up 34%. Henderson Express had paused all eastbound freight until integration was fixed. Iron Path had escalated its internal review and began contacting other logistics providers. At 1:03 p.m., my phone buzzed again. "Sierra. Direct line. No assistant, no email chain." "Leo," she said without greeting. "We need you." Her voice was thinner than I remembered, clipped at the edges. "I'm aware," I said dryly. "There were undocumented systems. The Cloud Nova team can't identify the dependencies." "I documented everything that was part of the official stack," I said. "I was never asked to do more than that." She paused, clearly swallowing her pride. "We're losing money by the hour. Thousands of orders are trapped in validation loops. The board is asking for a recovery plan." "Then we should talk about terms." A beat of silence. "You already named your rate." "There's an update," I said. "Given the scope, the minimum is now 80 hours, same rate, plus expenses, remote login only." "That's extortion." "No," I replied, voice calm. "That's expertise." She hung up. I returned to my current project, Fleet Corps' partner, Sync Audit. The CTO had asked me to assess their scalability ahead of a merger. It was clean work, honest, and most importantly, respectful. That night I got 6 more emails from Neuronix. Various teams, various levels of panic. They all asked the same thing, in different tones. "Can you come back? Can you explain what's breaking? Can you fix what we didn't understand?" And with each message, the same thought settled deeper into my chest. They still didn't get it. They thought this was about files, about access. But it was never just code. It was context. It was care. And without that, they were already lost. Friday, 2:47 a.m. I was asleep when my phone vibrated on the nightstand. I let it ring twice before answering. Leo? The voice was tight, anxious. It was James Way, a data engineer who'd once interned under me, now apparently roped into Neuronix's triage team. It's bad, he said. Really bad. The system crashed during an overnight sync. Cloud Nova tried a hard restart. Something about flushing outdated memory tables. And they corrupted the primary shipment database. I sat up slowly. How corrupted? 4 full days. Gone. No delivery logs, no routing records, no confirmations. It's just blank. Didn't speak for a moment. That wasn't a glitch. That was a collapse. 4 days of freight activity wiped out. Drivers on the road without instructions. Clients waiting for deliveries that no longer existed in the system, and no way to account for what had moved, where, or when. How did they restore it? I asked. They're trying, but their backups were set for weekly snapshots, not rolling logs. They assumed the AI wouldn't need old-school redundancy. Of course they did. I leaned against the cold tile of the kitchen counter and looked out at the night. The quiet hum of the fridge was the only sound, a rhythm of stillness that contrasted painfully with the chaos I could now picture inside the Neuronix servers. What else? I asked. They tried using Cloud Nova's default schema repair tool. It overwrote the routing index tables. I closed my eyes. That means the links between shipments and assigned routes are gone. Exactly. Even if we restore backup files, the dynamic routing logic you built, the one that adjusts in real time based on congestion, fuel efficiency, and driver patterns, it's toast. The system has no memory of what it optimized. I could hear James clicking through something. Then he stopped. Henderson's shipments are showing null destinations. Iron Path's deliveries from Tuesday have been reflagged as new inventory. We don't know what's en route, what's been dropped off, or what's overdue. He paused. Leo, how do we fix this? There it was. Not a demand. Not a negotiation. Just a quiet, scared question from someone stuck in a situation they never created and weren't trained to solve. And I knew the answer. I had designed the system with 3 levels of redundancy for exactly this kind of failure. Not because anyone told me to, but because I knew one day someone would push a button without understanding what it connected to. Those recovery protocols weren't part of any Cloud Nova documentation. They weren't on diagrams. They weren't anywhere the consultants had looked, because they had only ever looked for systems, never for wisdom. James, I said, I can restore everything in 6 hours, but it has to be me. No one else knows how. Can you walk us through it? If I tried, it'd take 18 hours minimum, and one wrong step could make the corruption permanent. Then, will you come in? My terms still stand. 80-hour minimum, $250 per hour, plus expenses, immediate payment. Another silence. She won't go for that, he said quietly, meaning Sierra. Then she'll go down with the ship. I hung up. Later that morning, Fleet Corps' CTO emailed me a system audit. A clean set of architecture diagrams, organized, predictable, sustainable, no surprises. Just systems that respected the engineers who built them. That afternoon, I signed a contract extension with Fleet Corps, because while Neuronix spiraled, I had something they no longer did: clarity. And I wasn't about to trade that for chaos. Saturday morning, 8:12 a.m. My phone rang again. Not James this time. Sierra. Leo. Her voice was raw, not tired, defeated. The board approved your rate. The payment is in motion. They're asking when you can begin. I sipped my coffee slowly. It had gone cold. I can start Monday, I said, pausing deliberately. But before I do, I have terms. You already gave them. No, I said. Those were my consulting conditions. These are restoration terms. She said nothing, but I knew she was still listening. 1. I get full administrative access. No restrictions. 2. I choose my own support team. I don't report to you. I don't report to Cloud Nova. I answer only to the board during this operation. A long pause. 3, I continued. Upon completion, I receive full written acknowledgement of my contributions to the Neuronix system, past and present. I want the legacy code attributed. My name, not engineering team." She exhaled. "Leo, this isn't about recognition. It is now." I waited. And finally I said quietly, "I want your resignation." In writing. Effective immediately upon successful recovery. The silence on the line stretched. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. Just slightly. "You're asking for a scalp." "No," I replied. "I'm asking for justice." I didn't hear from her again that weekend. But Monday at 7:48 a.m., an email arrived from David Romero, chair of the board. It was short, direct, and unlike anything I'd ever received from Neuronix leadership. "Mr. Martínez, your terms are acceptable. We look forward to your leadership during this critical restoration. Regards, David." At 9:03 a.m., I walked through the front entrance of Neuronix for the first time in months. No security badge, no ID photo, no ping-pong tournaments in the hallway. Just the sound of silence from a company that had tried to run without knowing how to steer. I made my way to the server room, the same one I'd spent countless weekends in, monitoring failovers and fine-tuning database indexes. It still smelled the same. Faint dust, cold air, and the subtle buzz of energy and motion, and for the first time in years no one questioned my presence. My first act wasn't to touch a machine. It was to unlock a cabinet in the corner, one few people knew existed. Inside was a set of backup disks, not part of the Cloud Nova sync schedule, but maintained by me in case of a situation exactly like this. Manual redundancies, hand-archived snapshots, a bridge between human instinct and machine process. Over the next 6 hours, I restored the system from a combination of off-site caches, local versioning logs, and temporary routing queues. The recovery wasn't elegant, but it was effective. Order data reappeared. Routes were reassigned. Partner systems lit up one by one like lights returning to a darkened city grid. By 4:12 p.m., the freight backlog had dropped by 76%. By 5:30, operations were fully online. Drivers had routes. Clients had tracking. The board had its company back, and Sierra? Gone. Her resignation email was quietly circulated that evening, wrapped in polite phrases like professional transition and new opportunities. But everyone knew the truth. She had spoken over the builders, and the system had punished her for it. Before I left, I uploaded one final document to the internal knowledge base. Legacy Systems and the Logic of Respect, authored by L. Martínez. Inside, I detailed every critical function I had built. No secrets, no revenge, just clarity, because systems deserve to outlive egos. But not at the cost of the people who created them. As I walked out of Neuronix one final time, Jordan caught up with me at the elevator. "You saved us," he said. I shook my head. "I saved the work. The people? That's up to you now. Will you come back?" he asked. I smiled. "No, I already did what they thought I couldn't, that's enough." That night back at home, I opened my laptop to a new email. Fleet Corps wanted to expand the contract. 6 months, full authority over back-end optimization. I accepted, because here's the thing no one tells you. There's nothing more powerful than walking away after they finally understand your worth. And when they try to rebuild without the architect, sometimes the whole empire has to fall before they remember why it stood at all. What happened at Neuronix isn't just a story about one man or one company. It's a warning. In the rush to automate, scale, and digitize everything, we've grown, comfortable discarding the very minds that built the systems we now depend on. We trade wisdom for speed, experience for flash, and forget that the foundation of any complex infrastructure is not just code. It's context. Legacy isn't a burden. It's a blueprint, and when you erase it, you don't just lose old knowledge. You lose resilience. Leo Martínez wasn't a relic. He was a firewall, quiet, underestimated, and when ignored, the entire operation collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. If you're part of a company, a system, or even a team, remember this. Respect the builders or prepare to rebuild from the ashes. If this story moved something in you, or reminded you of someone who's been quietly holding everything together, take a second to leave a comment. Just say, "I've seen this happen." You don't need to explain. Others will understand. And if you believe more people need to hear stories like this, stories where dignity fights back, share this video, like it, and subscribe. Because the quiet ones, they're not gone. They're just waiting.